everybody. Good evening / good afternoon to our West Coast friend. I am Rebecca. I'm one of the career advisors in the Malone Center for Career Engagement, and wanted to really focus on entry-level research positions and research in general as an industry to help students learn more about their options and what sorts of things they might be able to pursue right after leaving Furman, perhaps as a gap year before graduate school or as a career in general. And so I've invited some very recent grads, 2020, 2019, 2021, to come back and join us tonight and talk about their experiences and their current roles and give us a little bit of advice as well. So I'm going to kick it over to Dr. Cinnamon Stetler in the psychology department to get us started. Thanks, everyone.
Hello, good evening. Welcome, everyone. And I want to do no more talking than I absolutely have to this evening. So I'm going to send it off to our first panelist. We have a really impressive quartet, I guess is the right word, of recent grads tonight. So I'll let them introduce themselves. We'll go in alphabetical order by last name. Calleigh, do you want to start?
Hi, I'm Calleigh. I graduated this past year in 2021, and I'm a bio major. Sorry, my dog is nudging my feet. But I currently work in orthopedic research at the Hawkins Foundation, which is a nonprofit in Greenville.
My name is Jessica. I was a graduate in 2020. My major was psychology, and I work at the University of Washington as a research assistant for the Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences, studying children language development.
All right, I'm Katheryn Peterson. I was a 2019 graduate from Furman with a public health major. I currently work at Atrium Health in the hepatobiliary pancreato surgery division, or HPB surgery. So I oversee all of our clinical trials and prospective research that we conduct there.
Hey folks, I'm Peyton Roth, 2019 grad from Furman. I'm a program manager at the American Enterprise Institute, which is a public policy think tank in DC.
And Peyton, what was your major at Furman?
Chemistry and poli-sci, double.
Double, okay. Took the easy road. Great. So should I throw out the first question? Okay. So did you see yourself doing this when you were at Furman? How did you decide to take this route, and what were some important factors in shaping that decision? And I'll just throw that out there to anyone who wants to jump in.
I can start with that one. So I kind of knew I wanted to do research when I started doing it at Furman, taking advantage of the research opportunities that were available. I originally had planned to go straight into grad school, but life doesn't always work out that way, and ended up finding this lovely research assistant job after a while, and it's like keeping me in line with those career goals while also like allowing me to take time for myself, and yeah.
I can also contribute to this. Coming into Furman, I actually had zero idea what I wanted to do with my life. So I took a bunch of courses at Furman, eventually fell in love with the public health major, and I did a lot of research with Dr. Sliney, Dr. Shanice Chris, as well with the Liberal Greenville Corporation. I realized I really loved research, but I didn't love the type of research I was doing. So when I started applying for jobs, I started looking at research that was more hands-on, more patient contact, and then I found the job that I have, and I love it.
I kind of had a similar situation. Going into my last year at Furman, I was convinced I wanted to go to grad school right out of college. And then I think it was about April, I started thinking, oh my gosh, I don't think I want to commit to that. And so I started looking for jobs, and eventually, kind of like what another one of our panelists was saying, stumbled upon this job position, and then kind of just tried it out and wanted to see how I liked it, and ended up really enjoying it because I get a lot of patient interaction as well. And it's a really nice hybrid that combines what I did in undergrad research with some more real world things and makes you feel like you're making a difference.
So I thought I wanted to be a doctor, and AEI actually convinced me otherwise. So I had a chemistry major, was pre-med most of my time at Furman, and the research that I did at Furman, I guess I did a little bit of research with the Riley Institute, but the primary research was synthetic organic chemistry, so not very related to what I'm doing today. And it was encountering the scholarship of a lot of folks who work at AEI that I fell in love with a different type of policy research than I had seen. And by the end of my senior year, knew that the sort of think tank policy space in DC was where I wanted to be, and was really lucky to find a job at the organization that sparked my interest in the first place.
So maybe I'll just ask each of you to kind of go in reverse order now and just follow up to kind of how did you find your job, and what experiences at Furman do you think helped you land the job, or what qualifications did you feel like you had to get the job? Peyton, you mentioned that you had done some research, but it was very different kind of research. So do you have to have done research in order to get a research position, or kind of what's your take on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think probably coming out of Furman, I way overemphasized in my mind the importance of hard skills in entry-level research jobs, and underemphasized the importance of some undefinables, and specifically kind of creative thinking, quick on your feet, problem solving, and being able to work on a team really well. So that was a really sort of early lesson that I learned. In terms of getting the job, for me, it was a matter of leveraging the Furman network actually in DC, but then also leveraging some relationships I had built throughout college, through AEI's student network program. So that was a really, really important part of the job that I ultimately landed. And then I would say three forces really prepared me. So first was chemistry research. Having a sort of hard science or quantitative background can actually set you apart from other applicants in the sort of social sciences, especially in DC in the policy research space, because you can sort of, you have a strong foundation and an understanding of what some rigorous research looks like. The Riley Institute taught me how to do data, and so that was really important. Specifically, Dr. Fleming, he was amazing and a great mentor. And then Ben and Jenna Story taught me how to think critically about questions and understand the underlying questions. Right? There's the surface level conversation, but then there are the underlying assumptions that people make whenever they're talking through different research questions. So that was a big force.
So with my path to my current job, I'll start with obviously Furman. I took full advantage of the Furman Advantage. I'm not a plug for them, I promise. I did the Furman Advantage twice, and that really helped me down my career path. Summer between sophomore and junior year, I worked with Dr. Chris doing qualitative research with Live Well Greenville, and through that experience, that was my first raw exposure to research outside of a research methods class. And I really enjoyed it, being able to interact with community members, as well as working with a mentor and as having colleagues that I could rely on, and they could help me with problem solving that I had. Although I did really enjoy my experience, I knew qualitative research was not for me. I wanted hands-on quantitative and being able to see data come into fruition in front of me. So the next summer, I did an internship with Emory University, and I was working on an HIV study trying to keep HIV-infected cocaine users within retention and care clinics. Sorry, it's been a long day. And I really enjoyed that experience. It definitely taught me a lot about how to collect data, the proper uses of the Institutional Review Board or the IRB, and helping keeping research study above bar and making sure everyone's doing what they need to do to keep the study going. But I also felt like I was missing something through that. And I didn't know what it was until I actually got into my current role. And I really am passionate about interacting with patients and actually helping their surgical experience be better. I had a family member who had a less than desirable experience with surgery. So ever since then, I've been a little bit more influential in trying to be in surgical research. And so this is actually my second position I currently have in surgical research. My first was in orthopedic surgery as well. And the way I found the job was just combing through a bunch of the job market websites. I knew I wanted to come back to Charlotte. It's where I was born, where my family is. I was on the Atrium Health website because I knew they were one of the largest employers in Charlotte for research and medical experience personnel. I worked with I was a nanny in Furman, and the family I nannied for, he was actually an orthopedic surgeon who had a contact from Charlotte and put in a really good word for me. And that's how I found and got my ultimate job.
So I actually found my current position through the pre-health email at Furman. Funnily enough, I opened it up when I was in the middle of job searching and I saw the job listing. I said, hey, that kind of sounds like something I'd want to do. So previously I had done research for 2 consecutive years at Furman with different biology professors. I had done one with Dr. Rourke with sea anemones and one with Dr. Quinn with song sparrows. And that was a really great introductory experience for me because it kind of showed me that I really enjoyed the research aspect. I really enjoyed finding answers to questions and creating my own questions to things I wanted to solve. So when I saw this job listing, I just kind of thought that that would be a really neat way to kind of put all those skills that I had learned into practice. I wouldn't say that research was necessarily necessary for my current role. I'm a research assistant at the moment for an orthopedic nonprofit. And although it was super helpful to have an idea of what the research process looked and learn those hard skills like data collection, Excel is another really big thing that we do. And my research with my Furman faculty really taught me how to, stay organized, stay on track, be really attentive to detail. So those were all fantastic things I learned from that research experience. But I think even if I didn't have that experience, it wouldn't have necessarily excluded me from getting into this role per se. I think for entry-level research positions, the biggest qualities you can have are the attention to detail, especially if you are looking to do healthcare research. The attention to detail, organization, and all of those skills that you learn through all of your plentiful Furman classes are really the biggest assets because they're not expecting you to come in with all of this research experience for an entry-level role. As long as you have that drive and the eye for detail, I think you'll be just fine.
I will really echo a lot of the things that the other panelists have said. So I did research with Dr. Hahn and Dr. Putnam in the psychology department, and I learned a lot of those really hard skills, how to see a research project from the beginning all the way to the end of data collection and then writing the paper. But honestly, I don't use many of those skills currently as a research assistant. What I do use is the ability to ask for help when necessary, right? Knowing when it's enough to problem solve on my own, and then when I need help from a team, how to work with that team. I think probably the biggest hard skill that I learned that was helpful from research was interacting with parents. That's a big part of my job, is scheduling parents and getting them into the system. And then data collection, but you can't prepare for what data collection is going to look like all the time. So really just having those soft skills of being able to be flexible, adjust, ask for help, know when things are, when to change things, right? Being really mindful of what you're doing. I found my job through the psychology job wiki. But honestly, I was in other positions that were less what I wanted to do, less psychology research focused, and 5 months after applying to this job, got a call from my now boss saying, do you want to interview? So the job market's really difficult, but if you hang in there and really show yourself, it'll work out.
Yeah, that's for sure. There's a lot of flux and change in the job market right now. And in some ways, it's a good thing for job seekers, but in some ways, it makes it like kind of just really turbulent and more challenging to navigate. Um, so, Jessica, you mentioned a little bit about kind of what you do in terms of contacting parents and scheduling kids for research studies. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit more about kind of what a typical day looks like, or what your day to day looks like, and what your kind of daily and weekly goals are. And then want to hear the same thing from the other panelists. And it's interesting to hear your take on like how much of what you did in research at Furman you actually apply and use in your day to day.
Yeah, and
If it's not that much.
well, it's less of the specifics, right? Like when you do research at Furman in undergrad, you are learning all of these skills that, like, the specific parts of them are not going to transfer, right? Like, I did a study with Dr. Hahn where, like, kids had to dress up and we had to pretend play together. I don't do that anymore, but it gives me information on how to, like, interact with young children the way I need to in my job with the data collection. So my day, we have a lot of different studies going on, so there has to be a lot of flexibility. Most of it is scheduling participants and talking with parents, explaining studies, and then the data collection, actually meeting with kids and sometimes teenagers. And then there's also just some data upkeep that has to occur. So that's another thing that I learned from Furman that has really transferred over, is how to like organize data and look at it in a clear way to send over to the people who are going to do more important things with it. It's research assistant. The job is to keep it all together.
Okay, I'll go next. So my day-to-day really varies on what current research studies we have open with our institutional review board, with our IRB. So this week I begin most mornings just by screening our surgeons' either clinics or surgical calendars to try and find patients that fit the protocols that we have in place for our studies. An example of some studies that we have, we are investigating some industry-provided products such as microwave ablation probes, which are essentially little probes that go into your liver to help get rid of liver lesions. We're also doing mesh studies to see how they affect hernia developments or prevention in that case. And some of these are just cutting edge and really unique experiences. So you also have to micromanage the industry side, ensuring them that you are doing what you need to do and getting all the research participants that you can for them. Aside from that, the rest of my day is making sure all of our paperwork is up to date. All of our surgeons are up to date on the training that they need to make sure that they can still conduct research studies. We also host at Atrium a lot of courses to help progress the knowledge of microwave ablations and other cutting edge technologies. So I am coordinating a lot of courses to bring in outside surgeons to help make sure they are up to date and they are aware of these new technologies and how to best use them in labs that we do on site. I also have a research assistant that I help out with data management, helps to identify new patients for him as well. And that's mostly what most of my day consists of. If I have a busy week for patient population wise, I'm in the OR probably 60% of the time, making sure all of our devices are being used correctly, accountability is being kept, and just to be there to ask for the surgeon to ask me any questions they might have about the protocol. At any given time, I probably know 10 to 12 protocols very well, and that's also a big part of my job. So at least once or twice a month, I'll reread all of our protocols, make sure I'm aware of them, and whenever we have a study patient for that particular study, I'll know the protocol before I even go in the OR.
Thanks, Katheryn. Yeah, it's really interesting to hear about kind of like what your work setting is like and where you are physically to do your work. How much of your time do you sit in front of a computer versus in meetings versus in a more clinical and applied space?
Right.
Calleigh, how about you?
So my job is kind of similar to Katheryn's here, except I work more on the ortho side of things. So as a research assistant, about 50% of my day is spent managing patient follow-up. So that means I'm actually in a clinic room getting measurements for patients for our different orthopedic research studies. So at the moment, some of ours have to do with suture anchors that are used to repair the rotator cuff or the biceps tendon. We have a single blind study going on that's evaluating rotator cuff repair with a nanofiber scaffold. So it's a single blind study. And then we have two kind of retrospective studies that we're working on that aren't as much work. But basically, my fellow coworker and I, who's also an assistant, we basically do a lot of the same things, such as screening for patients to enroll in these active studies. We go in and we manage these follow-up visits. We take strength measurements. We get range of motion with the help of a PA, and any other sort of measurements or data collection that needs to be done for these sponsor-specific studies. And then, of course, there's managing all the data, putting them into the proper online systems to report back to the sponsor, managing our internal logs and internal spreadsheets and protocols. And then the other 50% is really focusing on our data itself. So we do a lot of studies with sponsors, but we also have a lot of investigator-led studies with our surgeons. So sometimes they have a question like, hey, I want to know how giving an injection in the shoulder is going to change outcomes before or after surgery. So our recent project that we did, my coworker and I combed through hundreds of patient charts, kind of built this data set to answer that question. And it's really exciting because that one's actually going to be published and we're going to be second authors on it with the work that we've done. But it's little projects like that that kind of vary throughout the day, depending on which surgeons have questions they want to answer, what kind of data we need to manage on our front. But usually it's pretty evenly split between being in the office and being with the patient rooms or in meetings.
So I work in an office, and most of my research is spent in data sets. So it looks very different depending on the type of project. I guess maybe a third of projects are survey data research. So we'll design and field surveys, which are a very blunt instrument, but to try to understand individuals' experiences in different aspects of life. One example is just at the immediate onset of the pandemic, we developed a design for a longitudinal survey model that addressed some shortcomings in other methods people were using, so we could follow individuals throughout the course of the pandemic and understand not only their experience of economic hardship, but also how that related to some other important family dynamics, whether their kids were in school, whether they were able to find a childcare center, aspects like that. Another third of our research focuses on using large, either government or sometimes private data sets. Some of those are cross-sectional and they'll just look at a moment in time. Others will follow people throughout their life course or over a period of time. And a lot of times we'll use those to try to understand the determinants of poverty or upward mobility. And then another third of our time is spent critiquing research methods. So a lot of what think tanks do is we'll comb through a lot of methods that people use to study research questions and identify best practices and then also critique practices that lead to sort of misleading results.
So it sounds like some of you have some variety in your work, and Peyton's work is, I think, because of its less clinical nature, you're not going into a hospital or clinical setting necessarily, but doing a lot of digging, kind of with a fine-tooth comb, looking at data and past research. I wonder, maybe we could shift gears a little bit and think about what advice you would have for a student at Furman right now, and what you would want to tell that student with respect to what they should do or what they should not worry about that maybe you feel like you spent too much time on, or what advice would you give yourself as a first year student if you could go back in time. And we can totally mix it up. I don't want to be rigid about the order here. So if anyone wants to deviate from our usual practice, that's fine. Jump right in.
I can start with this one. So I think one of the biggest pieces of advice that I would have given probably myself in my junior year of college is that it's okay to not go to grad school immediately after graduating from Furman. I felt like I was often given the message that that was the expectation. Like Furman prepares you for a lot of things, including grad school. I know at least the psychology department. So like knowing that it's okay to take time to not be in school, to like, even if you want to put research aside for a little while, if you really love it, but you're like, I need to do something else for a minute, do that. But like really take care of yourself, because it's really important to whatever you want to do for the rest of your life. And also I think that like for freshman me, I would say try as many different things as possible while at Furman, right? Furman gives you a lot of really good opportunities to experience different things. So don't lock yourself into a box. Don't say freshman year, like, I'm going to do this and it will be my career and my life. It's perfectly fine if that's how it turns out. But I think it's important not to keep yourself closed in. And I found that to be really helpful when deciding what I wanted to do as a career and whether or not I wanted to go to grad school. I do, but I put it off for a little while. And it's turned into something really wonderful. I moved across the country. I live in Washington, lived in South Carolina my whole life. And I think if I had stuck myself in the box that I entered Furman with, I wouldn't be having such wonderful experiences now.
I'm going to echo that. If I could tell freshman year me one thing, it would be to don't stress the small stuff. I think it's really easy, especially with Furman being the way that it is. There's a lot of really wonderful people, a lot of really talented people, but I feel like we hold ourselves to a really, really almost impossibly high standard all the time. And so I would tell myself, like, take a breath. Like the things that you're worried about at the moment, you're not going to care about them so much in about 6 months. So don't panic about little things like how you did on that test right away. Just if you're doing your best, you're going to do okay. And honestly, like if you don't get an A on that test, if you just keep working hard and keep on that right track, everything is really going to work out. It may not be the way or the time frame that you think it'll be, but you just have to trust yourself and kind of know that things will work out eventually. And then if I had to tell anybody who's about to go through this whole job process, is also kind of similar. Don't box yourself in. Don't make yourself feel like you have to go to grad school right away. I was convinced for the longest time I had to go right out of Furman, and I am so glad I didn't, because I never would have found this job. I never would have found this opportunity and been working with these fantastic people that I do now. And it's really kind of changed what I want to do with my life. I think I kind of want to stick with what I'm doing, and maybe I'll go to grad school in the future. But if I had boxed myself in, never would have found that.
I'll definitely echo everything the other panelists have said so far. If I could give myself some advice when I was a senior, it would have been, don't apply to jobs that you're not passionate about or that are not sparking your joy. I did that. It stressed me out from here to eternity. The job application process is a two-way street, just like applying to a Furman was. You have to want them and they have to want you as well. So even if you do apply to a job that you're like, oh, I don't know if I would really enjoy that or not, go through the process, because it is nice to get some interview experience. I'll give a little anecdote. I applied for several jobs following Furman, got a lot of interviews, and I said no to some of them because I knew that wasn't a job that would spark my joy. I would not be happy there in a year. So that's the advice I would give myself senior year. Freshman year, kind of echoing on that, do things that spark your joy. It's freshman year, you have a lot of time on your hands, you're at Furman for a while. Do things that you're passionate about or things that you might be passionate about. And if at the end of the day you're not passionate about it, at least you can say you can try it.
I guess two things. I would tell myself to think more about relationships, less about resumes. There were a lot of activities I engaged in or things I did where I thought it was a box to check. And all of the most fruitful intellectual and extracurricular endeavors I had at Furman, it was when there was a mentorship kind of relationship that I developed with a professor or with a local expert or professional or someone else on Furman's campus, and really was able to learn firsthand from someone and learn not only about their trade but also about the character and mindset that they approach their work with. And so that was really important. And then I think I kind of fell into the trap of trying to do everything at Furman when it came to extracurricular life. And so I would tell myself not to sweat having the appearance of being busy all the time, and instead to pick a few extracurriculars that were really meaningful and invest everything in them. Instead of trying to collect titles at a lot of places.
Relationships, not resumes. I like that. I really like that. Rebecca, should we turn it over to the audience now, or?
Yeah, that's fine. If we want to, anyone who's in the audience, if you have a question, feel free to pop it in the chat or, raise a hand. We can allow you to talk. If there's no one that has a specific question, we'll just keep kind of working through the list here. But yeah, that's an open door the whole time.
Yeah, something you heard has sparked a question, and so I wanted to make some space for that. But I know people have submitted a lot of great questions ahead of time, and I certainly have several more on my list that I can get to. Yeah. Pause a minute or two to see if there are questions. Somebody said take a breath, and that's great advice too.
Yes. I don't see anything right now, but.
Maybe you guys can then talk about the infrastructure or the process that you're engaging in now to figure out next steps for you. Or maybe you feel like this is a gig that you could see yourself in for the next, several years. So you're not thinking about next steps, but maybe kind of speak to that, since many of these positions, but not always, are kind of stepping stones to graduate or professional degree programs.
So I can start on this. Currently, I am in the process of applying for my master's degree in public health. My idea is to do a program with an autosynchronous program format, which means you can do the program at your own pace. You just have certain deadlines that you have to meet, because once you start working, you have an income, you have health benefits. It's really hard to want to give those up. I'm going to be honest. And I know myself, I worked a lot through Furman. I had 3 jobs. I know that I can handle the balance of work life and school again. So I'm going to be doing night school for my MPH. Have not decided where yet. So fingers crossed I get in somewhere soon. But that's my next step. I don't know if I want to pursue my PhD yet or not, but I know master's is the next step, because then from there I can be a more effective researcher and especially progress my career.
For me, this job I've considered it a stepping stone, but have recently decided that I'm just going to take some time to figure out what I want to go to grad school for. So I do feel this push to go ahead and apply and get into a grad school, but I'll be honest, I don't know what I want to research. I know I want to do research, but there's so many things you can do with, and I haven't currently had the opportunity to do research in the areas I'm interested in. So for me right now, it is a stepping stone, but I'm going to stay on it for a while. And what I'm doing in the meantime is just reading, right? Learning as much as I can outside of the academic context to kind of figure out what I care about, what I feel will be a helpful contribution in terms of research for the world.
DC is not a super credentialist place, and so I've actually decided that I'm not going to pursue a PhD. So there are kind of two pathways to more senior fellow positions at think tanks. There's kind of the academic pathway of getting a PhD and doing research, and then there's more of a practitioner pathway where you build expertise through working on the ground. And I've kind of decided that that approach is just more in line with where I see myself in the future. And so a lot of people will use entry level jobs at think tanks as a stepping stone before grad school. And I've recently kind of moved into a new role where I'm helping to start a new research center at AEI. So I'm going to take that for the next year or two. Try and build out that center, build our research agenda, and then maybe move somewhere in a little bit more of a practitioner role, working with people on the ground.
So for me, this actually has been a great stepping stone because it's allowed me to figure out that I really do like this area of work, at least for the time being. So I'm actually in the process of moving into a new role as a coordinator with Prisma Health in the anesthesia unit. So I'm starting that on Monday. And as of right now, I don't have plans to go to grad school in the next year or so, but that definitely might change. What I want to go to grad school for might change. If I decide I want to keep doing this research, my degree might be in pharmacogenetics because some of those research studies are fascinating to me. But originally at Furman, I wanted to be a genetic counselor, so I haven't totally ruled that out. But I'm just kind of taking it week by week and seeing what I want to do.
Can I interrupt for just a second?
Absolutely.
So I recognize some names on the participant list and some students that I'm like currently meeting with who are searching for these opportunities. So I just want to kind of give a voice to them really quick. I'm curious, you all mentioned how you found your position, but I'm really curious too, through that search process or even just the application process and the interview process, like what was really challenging or on the flip side of that, what worked really well? And I know Peyton, like you mentioned the alumni network. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about like how did you leverage that or what really helped you maybe find an opportunity that you didn't know existed? Because I think most of our students hop online, they just type in some keywords and they're hoping they can find that magic job, right? So I'm just curious if we can dig into that a little bit more.
That did not work for me. Hopping online and trying to search for a lot of job application processes are really impersonal, and it's there's something unjust and also something beautiful in some cases about how kind of sometimes when stars align and there's a very personal job application process where someone knows you and can vouch for you and so that's usually, at least in my field, usually what ends up happening, because a lot of relationships, coworker relationships, are built on trust, and so that can be a big deal. It was honestly for me a factor of pulling out my Rolodex and reaching out to everyone I knew who was in DC working in this kind of field, and then asking them at the end of every coffee, who do you know that I should be talking to? And it didn't take that many of those meetings to find some really amazing opportunities. It's actually really interesting too, because a lot of people I was really shy about that, thinking, oh, that's transactional. But there are so many people who love to help folks who are trying to get a start in a field. And I know that's true of so many of the people that I work with. I love meeting with people who are interested in learning more about research positions and policy. So yeah, that was a big thing.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of that. Advice I have is informational interviews are a great tool that you can use to help find people within a field or who might know people that know of an opening within the field. LinkedIn can be your friend for this. I searched the Furman network within Charlotte a lot of the times when I was starting my job application process. and just messaged people very politely saying who I was, that I was a Furman student, and that I was interested in pursuing a career in research, and I would love to sit down and meet with them to hear about their research experience that they might have. Granted, this person might not have a job for you, but they might know of someone that does have a job, or someone else that they can connect you with for you to meet with and have another informational interview. And it's okay if they don't have a job. It's okay if you don't like what they say about the job that they have, but it's just something more that you can learn about. And it's also great interview practice as well for when you actually do get that job interview.
For 2 weeks later, they find out about a job opening, and then they can forward it to you because now they know you.
Exactly. So, and always follow up those informational interviews with a short little thank you note. So it's my advice.
I'm going to echo that and say definitely the hardest part is getting that first interview. Like people were saying before, it's a very impersonal process nowadays, and like LinkedIn and Indeed can be great, but for me it's really about utilizing who you know that can kind of make those connections for you, because it is so hard to differentiate your resume just on paper. One of the great ways to do that is if you are really interested in a role, write a cover letter, which I know it sounds super tedious and it's very daunting in the moment, but it really does take not too long and sets you apart from other applicants. And coming from somebody who's been interviewing people for my current role as I transition out, the people who send those follow-up letters and send those cover letters too typically do stand out to us, because it shows that you've put in a lot of thought and you really do connect with the position and that's something you want to do. So if you're just starting out too, I would say treat job searching like a job itself. Spend 10 to 20 minutes a day, just comb through listings and apply to things that kind of set your heart on fire. And if you hear back from some, great, but if not, you just keep applying and keep trying to get yourself out there, and eventually one will stick.
I'll echo what the other panelists have said, but I also want to add that it's okay to take a job that doesn't fit what you want to do for a while, right? Like, I think it's important to love what you do, but I didn't get this job until July of 2021, so a little over a year after I graduated. So I had other things that I did. I worked in fast food, because it was also COVID, right? Worked in fast food, worked as a research analyst where I just Googled things, right? And I didn't love those jobs, but a piece of advice that I've seen hold true is it's easier to find a job when you have one. And, you know, if you're lucky enough to get a research position right out of undergrad, that's great. But I feel like that's not the reality for a lot of people. There are a lot of graduates and there aren't that many research positions, at least in psychology, right? So it's okay to take a job that you don't love, but also spend time finding one that you do. Like for me, the psychology wiki for the jobs is really helpful. And I really like this idea of informational interviews as well, right? I was given that advice for applying to grad school to get in touch with the labs that did research I was interested in. And it never occurred to me to do it for a research position, but that's a great idea. Because like you'll end up probably talking to the lab manager who can like really tell you like what the research is like on the research assistant level. So yeah, all good advice.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would just add to let your faculty know that you're looking for these types of positions and that you're interested in these types of positions, because faculty have professional contacts and their professional associations and networks. And I often, I'll be on a listserv and I'll hear that, so-and-so at UNC Chapel Hill just got a big grant with funding for 2 new RAs. And, do I know of anybody? So I would, love to pass those kind of positions along to people who I know are interested in them. So I don't know until you tell me. So just, I would let people know. Don't keep it a secret. It's not a shame to be looking for a job. Spread the word for sure. Don't see any questions bubbling up in the chat at this point. Can you talk a little bit about your relationships with your supervisors in these positions? What role does that play in your day-to-day job, but also in your kind of thinking about your next steps and your shaping of your thinking about the path that you want to pursue?
For me, my coworkers and my boss are really wonderful. I've not actually gotten to meet the primary investigator for my lab yet, just because COVID, she's generally not in Seattle. But my lab manager, who's my direct boss, she's really wonderful and had no research experience when she entered her job there as an RA, and over the past 10 years has moved up into the lab manager position. So I forgot to mention that earlier, with the idea that you don't have to have research experience to like move far in these fields. And the same goes for most of my other coworkers. And like those relationships are really helpful. And knowing that when I do end up applying to grad school and ask for a letter of recommendation, it's most likely going to be written by my lab manager and then signed by the PI. So I think it's really important to have strong relationships with your coworkers, because it's often a team effort in research.
Yeah, I'll echo that, especially with my boss who came from startup businesses. So she has no research experience whatsoever before she started with our group. So we have a research manager who is my direct supervisor, mainly because we have 4 PIs who are all surgeons and are all very opinionated. So she is kind of like the mom of the group, making sure they all behave themselves. And she has been an inspiration just to work with, because she has done so many past experiences in her life, and how it's very fluid and very flexible. And it's kind of proof to show that you're not going to be stuck in one research path or one career path when you start right out of undergrad. Your path, you're young. Your path is going to take you on so many different avenues and streets, so don't be afraid to embrace those. But the relationship that I have with her is kind of somewhere between the older sister that you either want or never had, and a mother. Like, that's how we interact with each other. I know that's probably not the normal for most people, but I'll go to her with any question that I have, and we'll also just sit and have coffee in the morning and chit chat about life. And I don't know, it's been a very unique experience compared to other bosses that I've had in the past, but it's one that I embrace and that I cherish.
I have so I've worked with 4 different scholars, primarily over the past few years, who live in 4 different cities. One is an economist, another is a sociologist, one is a former politician, and another is a former charter school leader. And so each of those, that's a long way of saying each of those relationships looks very different, and each has been incredibly valuable. And I've learned a lot from each different relationship. I would say that sort of breadth, it gave me sort of vision for the spurious paths that can lead to the same place, and then also sort of there are shared characteristics among each. And it's mostly their fundamental character, the fact that they're not in their field of work for themselves. That's a really important thing actually in the policy world, because it's pretty obvious when someone's just kind of in their field for self-advancement. And so each of those relationships have been very different and fulfilling in their own way. I mentioned all of them are in different cities, so I've had to learn how to manage a remote work kind of relationship with each of those bosses. So that was unique. Also helped make it a little bit easier to pivot during COVID, though.
I kind of have a similar experience that Katheryn does. My boss has been the most wonderful person I could ask for my first quote unquote big kid job outside of college. He's been very supportive and not only teaching me the ropes of this whole research discipline, but is also one of the main reasons I was able to get my new job, because he has such a great reputation in the industry. So I would echo that your relationship with your coworkers is extremely important, especially in the research discipline. So much time together coming through data and kind of like what might seem like a mundane Excel spreadsheet. Like you're spending so much time together working on these projects. So definitely, we've been very lucky with how our bosses and all of our team members, but the work environment and your coworkers play a significant factor in your productivity and how your office environment goes.
Great, thank you. I was just looking over the list of questions that were submitted, and there's maybe one or two that I feel like we maybe haven't touched on as much. One was, what is the hardest thing about transitioning out of Furman? So maybe you could speak to the difference between being a student and being a bachelor's degree holding employee.
For me, the most difficult part of the transition was the flexibility. So, like with Furman, well, at Furman, like you have classes, but they happen at about the same time every day. But you have these long stretches of time where you're not in class and you're not like you're doing homework, but it's not nearly as structured. My job is essentially a 9 to 5. I'll come in the evenings or the weekends if parents need it for data collection. But having like the flexibility you have at Furman, you have in college to just kind of do what you need to do. I really liked that structure and have struggled a little bit adjusting to the 9 to 5 every day. But you know, you do it and it works out. Yeah.
I think the biggest difficulty for me was kind of leaving all of the people I kind of grew with over the past 4 years. I got super lucky in the sense that two of my really close permanent friends and I actually lived together this past year. So that was a really nice transition out of campus living and out of those types of relationships for me. But definitely, I would echo the 9 to 5 is a little bit difficult, and it's definitely not the same as when you're going to a full schedule of classes because you have those breaks in between, you have all that downtime. But for me, I find that the sort of 9 to 5 lifestyle is actually really beneficial because you do have a lot more free time than you think, in the sense that because you're not doing homework at the end of the day. It's nice to have a very consistent schedule to plan things around. And for me, that part hasn't really been too bad. I've learned to fit everything in that I usually did throughout the day around those different time periods. But definitely leaving everybody that you're familiar with was probably the hardest part. So for any seniors who are in the group, just cherish those moments and don't wish it away, if I could say one thing.
I'll definitely echo leaving the friends behind part. That was probably the hardest thing I had to do, especially because most of my friends were either from the Northeast or the West Coast, and they went back home as well. I will say I love having a 9 to 5. At Furman, I fell into the group of individuals who tried to do everything and had no social life and was not internally thriving because of that. So having a 9 to 5, I've actually been able to have a lot more me time, more reflective time, which has been beneficial for my mental health and my psyche. I really appreciate it. Because you, like the other panelists have said, you have a lot more time than you think you do during that 9 to 5. You're able to fit in hanging out with friends on the weekends or after work, hanging out with coworkers. It's very big, and especially in my company, to hang out with coworkers and get to know them on a more personal level. You never know where they might go and where they might be able to help you out later in life. So just finding time for me was probably the biggest transition, and it was a good transition that I did. But leaving your friends is hard, so definitely make sure you have the last hurrahs for any seniors that are here, because you'll miss them dearly. And make sure you go to homecomings if you're able to, because they'll probably be there too.
Two things. I think the flexibility isn't the right word. There's a volume of projects that you have to manage, and I think in an undergrad setting, your projects or your assignments are very structured. So you have deadlines, you have a reading assignment for this class that's due at this time. And timelines don't always work that way in a job, and they certainly didn't for me. And so learning to triage when you have a large volume of emails coming in, when you've got a large volume of projects to work on, learning to decipher which tasks are urgent, and when you need to block off a few hours of time and ignore email and focus on writing or digging through data, that kind of thing. That was an important skill to learn in a tough transition. And then feedback. You don't get graded regularly in a job, and so learning to ask for and give feedback freely in a professional way is a really good skill. It's not something I knew I would have to develop, and it was an important skill to develop. So yeah.
Yeah, and I know we're approaching the 8 o'clock hour, so I think that's a nice segue to kind of summarize. I've heard about a lot of skills that it sounds like Furman, some of which Furman offers you directly, and some of which Furman offers you if you seek it out. But a lot of research-related skills that can then be applied to a variety of areas or topics or research questions, depending on your interest and your passion. So just doing kind of similar work or similar projects, being exposed to the process of research and the questioning and the thinking involved while you're at Furman will prepare you to thrive in a research-related position afterwards, no matter what the topic or what the area or what the field is, which can be for the intellectually curious students at Furman the hardest thing to figure out. Just like Jessica is saying, like, I'm interested in everything. There are so much we don't know, and how do I pick one? And so that's often the hardest thing. But if you've got the skills to apply, it's really just about listening to what your passion is and what you're most interested in. Any burning questions we haven't gotten to, or anything you want to wrap up and end on, Rebecca?
Yeah, I was just double checking to make sure we didn't miss anything, but I will just tell everybody that's attending, we will send, a thank you for those of you who attended as students, and we will share our panelists' contact information if you'd like to follow up with one of them or all of them, whatever you want to do to learn more about their jobs or ask any questions that maybe you just wanted to direct towards someone in particular. So we will share that with students who attended, and also just a plug for the Malone Center. If you need help with the job search, if you need help, just want to talk it through with someone, need someone to listen, to vent, to reflect, provide some ideas or advice, that's what we're here for. So please, reach out, schedule an appointment. For the alums here, the panelists, just so you all know, you do have lifetime services with the Malone Center. So if you ever do find yourself in a career transition, or you want to apply to grad school and you need some help with that process, whatever it is, you can always come back and get some help through our office. So really appreciate everybody's time tonight and just your wonderful thoughts and insights. So, and thank you, Dr. Stetler, for moderating. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, this was great. My pleasure.
Wonderful. All right. Well, we'll let you get back to your evenings, and thanks everybody for coming.